Hey, guys, again, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you coming out on a Saturday morning like this. This is the February installment of our monthly Educator workshop series. We do these every month. They're really one of my favorite parts of the job. It's just a chance for us to kind of come together and share some practices, share some themes in science, and just things that we're really excited about. It's a trying time right now, and this is kind of our opportunity to come together, right? I know that no one's excited about more online meetings and more screen time, but it's a chance for us to just kind of extend the ability to communicate to new places instead of just our local venue. My name is Brandon Rodriguez. I work in the education office at JPL. I'm joined by my colleague Paula Partida, the amazing person whose name you all know. If you don't know, you're definitely going to know by the end of today. And our plan is to kind of highlight a little bit about what's going on in preparation for entry and descent and landing, the Perseverance rover, but really with the focus on the educational resource and opportunities here. So this is just such an exciting time for students, and we have so much resources. We've been working just tirelessly to amplify how this event can really change some lives in STEM. We also have two great teachers today, Amanda and Guadalupe, two very good friends of mine. We're going to talk about how to extend this to more than just like the Mars mission, like what skills can we extract from what's happening and take that to our instruction moving forward. So before I run my mouth too much, I want to make sure I give this over to Paula so she can give us some background on all the cool resources that we have in the department. So please, Paula, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Paula Partida. I work in the education office with Brandon, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the website. I know many of you may be already very familiar with it, but there's so much going on the website, and we'd like to share a few things with you. So, Brandon, if you can get on the web, we offer educational resources to all educators. Educators can also contact us to request hard copy information. You have our email. You can send us an email anytime. This here is our education page. And from the education page to get to what teachers could use, if you click on the toolbar on Teach, and this is where all of our activities are listed. You can search by type of activities you need, subject, grade, and just different topics. You could also do a search engine. We have a search engine, so you can search whatever you need. You can also put in, if you're trying to find an activity that ties into NGSS, you can type in the information of that activity on the search bar and it comes up. Go ahead and click on Marsbound so we can get a little idea and how the activities are set up. Marsbound is definitely been used a lot with Mars and all the excitement that's going on right now.
Too many cameras.
There is all of our activities are set up just as you see. It has all the information on it, what the teacher needs to know about the activity. NGSS, Common Core standards are also listed. As you scroll down, you could see more information on how this activity connects to other areas. It's got the management, background, all the material list. Everything you need is listed. So they're easy to figure out and download. We have videos as well. So all our activities are listed this way. Go ahead and go back up, please. So on the toolbar, if you'd like to see what events are going on, click on the link for events, and everything that's going on, like today's event is listed. And as you scroll down, it's updated, and there's always something going on. Okay, so that these are our activities. Let me see. Could you think of anything else, Brandon?
Yeah, tell them about the Educator Resource Center.
Oh, yes, of course. So if you go to Teach, I think it's Teach, isn't it? And if you click on Resources, so I work in the Educator Resource Center. I'm the person that would send you resources when you request. Scroll down. This is our resources. Go ahead and scroll down. And if you click on the Educator Resource Center, this is a little bit of information of what we do, how to contact me. There's a phone number online, but you also have our email address. And so any teacher can request educational material. So we have all different areas of materials, solar system and all the JPL missions, and it just goes on and on. Depending on what you need is what I can send you, and I'll see what I have and package it up for you. So feel free to contact us anytime. Let's go to the intern page. Teachers always need to know about the intern page. We have interns for higher education. So you know which students, which parents are really focused and interested in internships. You definitely forward this information and let them know what's available. Everything's online. You can research, and there's many different kinds of internships. So we have quite a few hundred internships a year. So there's a lot of opportunity. It is high demand, of course, but there's also internships for teachers. So right there where the NASA IPAC teacher, you could click on that and see if it's something that you're interested in, and you can apply. There's more information. It has information and who you can contact if you're interested in this program. So feel free to explore. Go ahead and click on the word education right on the toolbar. I want to get back to the main page of the education page. There you go. So this is our main page. When you first click onto the education, it's a little carousel it keeps, showing highlights and things that are events and things that are going on at the time. So feel free to go through the little carousel and see what's going on, what's exciting. And so I think if you have anything else, Brandon, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can never sing the praises of Paula enough, right? So even though we are all work from home as well, Paula and I are very fortunate that we can get access sporadically. So email us and say, hey, can we get some merch for our kids? Can you send some stickers or some posters? And normally that's something we would do like next day. Give us like a week now that we can get on lab and kind of prepare that. But we're still going in and we're still mailing out free merchandise for you, for your students. And like now is just more than ever, it just means so much to the kids to get an opportunity to, be able to just get a little reward. I still teach. I teach high school physics, and I got a stack of postcards, and I just send a little note to my kids, every now and then, like, hey, great work on that exam or so forth. Just, I mean, any feedback or connection is, I think, just that much more valuable with everything we're going through right now. So please reach out as many times as you like. We have the luxury of having all of this great swag to send you, so please take advantage of it. The rest of the team, Oda, Lyle, and myself, and thanks to the amazing Kim, who is our web designer you see here, with a not so great rover, but she's pretty delighted to be to be launching it, I guess. We come from very, very different scientific and educational backgrounds, and that's how we decide to write the lessons that we do. It's not me as a grumpy old high school teacher, like putting together lessons for your kindergarten kids. You don't want that. But we have an elementary school teacher with, an earth science background. So our perspectives are really cooperative, congruent, that really, lends to a really diverse offering of lessons. So we're really proud of this. We're really proud of the website and the activities on it. That being said, we also communicate with you guys all the time. So please do these lessons. Tell us what worked, what didn't, what cool adaptations you made, so that we can continue to refine our website and make it better, right? All of our combined efforts make it that much more exciting. One thing we didn't mention, and I'll tell you, if you are kind of in a distance learning model, the Learn section has kind of evolved to be a little bit more student driven. And I'll say, as a teacher this year, I've really enjoyed, instead of the Teach section being more teacher led, as one would imagine, this is more like post an activity to a digital classroom, and the students explore on their own. So not only is it a little bit more interesting for the students, logistically, it's so much easier for me as a teacher, because I can say, I want you to do this, with some homemade materials that you might have, try it at home, follow the steps, etc., and then post your artifacts on our classroom. Comment on each other's, blueprints and so forth. So this allows for a little bit more away from the screen exploration instead of a live, mostly teacher-led kind of lecture model. So lots of options for you, no matter what your teaching situation is during COVID. So I think that's kind of our pitch and the walk around on the website. I want to pause. I haven't even taken a look. So let me see if there's anything in the chat that we want to discuss or take a look at. Any questions at all on the website? Yeah, I see a bunch of people saying how much they enjoyed Marsbound. Absolutely my favorite activity, probably one of the favorites in the department. So that's pretty neat. Oh, great, that's awesome. Yeah, everything, we are all teachers, right? So like, we understand the teacher budget. I remember when we started, like, it was a good exercise to see if we could do activities for $0. So like, when I needed straws, I went to In-N-Out and was like, hey, can I get like a couple extra straws, PVC pipe, we go to like the home goods, home repair place. We're like, you got any scrap PVC? So a very authentic dumpster diving experience to make sure it's valid for a teacher budget. Someone asked, did we give them the link to the project? Yeah, like what I do is if I'm doing something off the Learn site, I, kind of sticking to like a 5E model, I'm the engage, but then the rest of it is they get a lot more time for the explore on their own. So I still set up the activity, and we have some suggested ways to do that, right? Like some videos that kind of help them out, so like give them a little bit of context. So you could see some images from the Apollo 11 mission, something like that. So I set the stage, but just because I'm trying to value my synchronous versus asynchronous time, just being online and being like, all right, everyone, now fold the paper, tape your straw, like that's not good use of our educational time. So this is like, hey, take a day or two whenever it's convenient to you, put a little something together, and let's reconvene. My teaching structure right now is I only get 2 hours a day with the students. So anything I can have them do independently, I try to balance that a little bit better. Cool. Any other questions from the squad here? Anything before we jump into our first speaker? Feeling good, feeling good. Awesome. All right. Well, man, if you want to pull up your slides, let me first introduce the amazing Amanda Wood, a longtime friend of mine. Actually, she is probably my lifeline in my first year teaching. So if you thought you were a bad first year teacher, man, you got to see some videos of this guy. I mean, just really, really bad. But Amanda was there with kind of open arms and positive advice. And I think I'm only still in the game because of her. So we've stayed really close, and I was really excited to hear that she had done some really, really cool work with her students. So please, Amanda, take it away.
Thank you. And he was not a bad teacher at all. You're being mean to yourself. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in time and space. My name is Amanda Wood, and I want to talk about how language arts can meet STEM in the classroom, and more specifically with seminars. Basically to start a conversation about having conversations in class. I'm from Houston. I work in the Spring Branch District at Westchester Academy for International Studies, and I'm in Texas. We have actually been in person since around end of August, early September. So I've been teaching in person and virtually, sometimes at the exact same time. So it's been a real interesting ride this year. But let's go ahead and get started. I have a meme, of course. I've got LeVar Burton just because I think that's the person that inspires the love for exploration and science as well as literacy. But if you could just drop in the chat any of your first thoughts, funny stories, Star Trek memories, anything based in argument, musings. I'm interested in seeing what your reactions are. Oh, my slides aren't advancing. Brandon, can you help me out here? They're advancing for me, so I don't know if they're advancing for you.
Now we see them.
You can see them?
Yeah, you can next. You give me next slide, and I'll make sure.
Okay. So, can somebody let me know in the chat if you could tell me if you can actually see the slide? Oh yes, I do love working in Houston. It's pretty great. Yes, you can all see it. So, what are your first thoughts regarding the meme? Just anything. It could be a funny story, a Star Trek memory, anything based in argument, musings. I'll take whatever I can get. Oh, all the way to last season. Make it so #1. Very good. Yes, working in Houston is absolutely wonderful. I do love it. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Reading Rainbow. Yes, that was my favorite show as a kid. So I'm going to establish ethos just because I feel like I'm an English teacher and that's what I feel like I need to do. My teaching experience, I currently teach English language arts in an IB school. Years in education, I've had about 10. I actually did my student teaching in Heredia, Costa Rica. I taught in Mexico for 3 years, and then I moved on to teach in Houston. And I've been teaching there for 6 or 7 years. And bonus fact, I love science, and it's probably unusual to have an English teacher in front of you. And I was one of those kids that was really scared by science in high school just because I thought that I wasn't very good at it. And I feel like if I had more teachers talking to me about like how I could personally latch on to it, I think it would be more meaningful for me. But I do love it, even though to this day I can be kind of scared of it. But it's great to have like people around me and other teachers around me to help me out and like really dive into like what I am interested in. So you've probably heard this before about cross-disciplinary teaching or interdisciplinary teaching, like mixing subjects, right? So you know that it promotes the integration and synthesis of knowledge in real-world situations, higher-level reasoning skills. It helps students adapt and function in society, and it helps with critical thinking skills. But it also can be used to help like students work with data and analyze data. It can help subjects be adaptable based on interest and level of intended rigor. And like putting things together, you can help like build relationships with kids, right? You can see what other kids are good at. Because as an English teacher, I don't always see like the strengths of my students that are great with math and science. And I love seeing them get excited about content, seeing what they're good at. So what do we have in common? We've got our critical thinking skills. Oh, I see that actually. I'm so distracted. I saw that somebody taught at Spring Branch. It's so amazing. I love it. But we have critical thinking skills in common, evidence-based knowledge and responses. We want kids to decipher and break down complex tests. We want them to do research. We want them to always cite and reference everything that they get information from, and we want it to be from credible sources. And we know that our work is never done. It's always just in progress, right? So how can we bring this together? And this is just something that I do in class, and I'm hoping that you can take away some ideas to use in yours, whether you teach in STEM or maybe you have some friends that teach in language courses that you can kind of like nudge them and get them to bring scientific understanding and concepts into their work as well. So my steps to success are always through and this is, of course, not through the cycle of one lesson. I would encourage you to make this a cycle of a unit or a project. You will definitely need time to be able to cover this. You need to introduce them to the topic or conversation, and don't you be afraid to talk about it, okay? It's always adaptable to interest and level. You can always have them analyze articles, or you could have them analyze some primary texts and resources. You can teach them research and give them guiding questions. So like, what are the little questions they need to consider that are under the bigger umbrella of the conceptual understanding you want them to master? And then how do you answer these with verifiable research? And then before kids actually have the conversation in a big group, because that can be really scary, how do you have them practice this conversation in a safe space? So I have them talk about this in small groups to build confidence so that they can confide in their shared knowledge, and then eventually demonstrate their knowledge with their classmates on a larger scale. So Brandon, just so you know, my little animations aren't changing in here, so some slides might look kind of weird, but I'm going to try to break it down anyway, even though they look kind of funky. So I have my kids, oh, and went away. Do I need to reshare? Oh, beautiful. Brandon's going to do it. I love it. Just wait a second. Okay, there we go, perfect. So I actually did this recently with my students, and my students are in upper high school, and remember that everything is adaptable. So I teach 11th and 12th grade students. And I wanted them to discuss the falsifiability and that philosophy under the realm of science, okay? And then I have the short definition there for you. And Brandon, could you go ahead and click 2 or 3 times? Just to get all of those little pictures up. So a best practice is for students to engage with the literal before diving into analytical concepts of the actual content. This is really difficult material to really grasp, especially for someone who is 16, 17 years old. Okay, Brandon, go ahead and click for me. So what my first approach to do is when I give students the content is I want them to annotate. It's such an English teacher thing, but I always want them to try to break things down before they go and they try to analyze it. And I have a really simple annotation step. If you have them, You can make graphic organizers for this, which I've been having to do in a virtual setting, or they can write it down. Either way is fine, but I try to keep it simple and snap, right? I want them to summarize difficult content or scientific papers, journals, first of all with summary and main idea. And then I want them to notice those small details and ideas, okay? Maybe things that aren't as sticky right away. And then we will analyze the details of the greater meaning and then find the purpose behind those details in the smaller part and as the text as a whole. Go ahead and click for me. Thank you. So with the one, I love that you guys, very Common Core aligned. Yes, and it's really interesting because like I teach with the TEKS here in Texas, and it's very IB aligned. It's very everything aligned. I really love seminars a whole bunch. I will be the first person to advocate for them all the way. So what I've been doing virtually is having students chunk it out with graphic organizers. So I have the overall question on top. Does science need falsifiability? And then I have deeper questions for students to consider. And I want their answer as well as research and real-world applications in science. And if any of you have any experience with IB, you might recognize some of these questions as being theory of knowledge aligned questions. That is a class that many students take on logic and how we learn. We have, is the truth what the majority of people accept? Is there knowledge that a person or society has the responsibility to acquire or not to acquire? And then what are the consequences of either response? And then how does the compilation of evidence and falsifiability create deeper scientific understanding? So some students might need a guide or a subject to push them in the right direction. So that's where you kind of get to know your students and establish that relationship with them to get their interest and then suggest different things that they can use and explore to get their answers that they're going to seek. Okay. So Brandon, you want to click for me? Thank you. So I have a student exemplar. And I love my students so much. They just make me so happy. My student, she had a choice, and she chose something of interest to her, which was Mars. Her name is Arlette, and she's amazing and wonderful. Shout out to Arlette. But she incorporated the rovers that were launched, and she was really impassioned in her argument. And when she eventually talked, and you're going to get to see some of them talking in a few minutes, and if you look at the very bottom, you do have Karl Popper's psychology, and she referenced that in falsifiability as well. But she talked about the Pathfinder rover, the Mars Curiosity rover, but have them keep these in front of them just so that when they're speaking, they can go back and find things to justify their claims. Can you go ahead and click for me, Brandon? Okay, so while the video's playing, I'm going to mute myself. But I want you to ask yourself these questions, and if you have something you want to share in the chat, I really encourage you to. These students, they're so sweet. I love them to death. Kenny, Arlette, and Daniela. They were brave enough to come on and let me record them. And they knew I was going to be showing this to a whole bunch of people. So you're going to see them getting a little bit nervous sometimes. But this is their practice conversation before they do this with the entire class. So you're going to see them stumbling a little bit, getting confused a little bit, but ultimately learning based off of the conversation and becoming more fluent and more comfortable with the info. But again, when this plays in the chat, just let me know, do they sound informed? Do they sound ethical? Are they bringing in any interesting claims, evidence, and justification? So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself so Brandon can play the video.
At the moment, and so that's why I was saying that we still, even though the claim that there could be just another interstellar civilization, it could become falsifiable in the future with the new advancements in technologies. And so back to the question, which is the truth what the majority of people accept? Well, it's not very clear yet, so it's really hard whether or not what side to lean towards. So it wouldn't really, the claim wouldn't be falsifiable. So it would be non-scientific, but it could become scientific.
Okay, so the next question. Is there knowledge that a person or society has a responsibility to acquire or not to acquire? And what are the consequences of either responses? Well, I believe that we should all care about acquiring knowledge because in order to progress or advance as a society, we need to learn and discover new things. And all this acquired knowledge, it kept revolutionizing, and it has brought us to where we are today with all this technology and other things. And we're still learning and discovering more things as well. And it's like an example, it's like the Pathfinder rover that was sent to Mars in 1987, and then the Mars Curiosity rover sent in 2012. This is just to prove that acquired knowledge from either previous knowledge or learning from new sources can create advancements like these, because the Pathfinder rover only lasted 3 months. But now that the Curiosity rover was created, it's been there since 2012 and it's still going on. So scientists are, gathering data and finding a way as to how they could improve and make a better rover in this case.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment because, obviously being knowledgeable is very important, but also having the ability to acquire knowledge also builds upon prior, attempts to try and acquire knowledge, because it's the whole idea of science is being able to build upon the discoveries of what other people have made, and that's how we are able to make these advancements. For example, being a chemistry major, we obviously deal with a lot of elements, and particularly with the atomic theory. So we started with this idea that the world is made of 4 elements, but eventually that shifted towards the idea of there's tiny building blocks of matter. Those tiny building blocks are made of smaller building blocks, and eventually it just sort of shifts into this whole, mess that is quantum theory of elements. So but yeah, I think there's sort of responsibility for us to be able to acquire knowledge and be able to share that knowledge so that other people can make sense of that knowledge and continue building upon it, so that eventually we figure out what the truth is that people can accept.
All right, I know it was kind of difficult to hear Arlette in the middle, but she brought up a point that because we're sharing knowledge with one another, scientists are able to build off of the previous knowledge that others have discovered and make other things better. And she brought up the Mars rover. So that was the context of what she shared. And a couple slides ago, she did share that also in her graphic organizer. So Brandon, could you go ahead and click for me? I think it's playing again. Oh, there we go. So I tried to figure out a way to give you some tips on doing this both in person and through Zoom and WebEx. In person, I'm a really big fan of the fishbowl concept, having observers on the outside documenting conversation to watch the people on the inside. But if you're on Zoom, what I really like to do, or even WebEx, is have the kids who are currently in the conversation turn on their cameras, while the kids who are outside of the conversation keep them off and reflect on what other people are saying. If you're like me and you have trouble getting kids to keep their cameras on, You can track them through audio only, but just try to establish relationships with them. That's my biggest trick for getting the kids to keep their cameras on. But it can be done that way. If you are asynchronous, a really good way to get kids to do a seminar, I'm a really big fan of Flipgrid. You can make a curated seminar using Flipgrid and having students respond to each other through that method as well. It's really helpful. Brandon, could you go ahead and click for me? So click 2 times. What I like to do so that kids could see where they're at is track conversation. I'll share my screen and I will put their names up on the board so that they can see how well they're doing. I will use, yes, I love Padlet. Padlet is great for that type of thing as well. Yes, also highly recommend Padlet. I'm looking at the chat as well. I'd like to document the types of participation. If I'm in person and I have like the doc share camera, I'll use it like with symbols like happy faces and stars. But as they speak, I'm listening. If they gave insightful participation, I'll put one symbol. If they use with evidence, I put another. And then like if they say something that's earth-shattering, something that I didn't even know, I'll put like, whoa. And they're really proud when they get those responses. In order for them to monitor airtime, I will highlight their name when they have participated enough to get the grade that they think is going to be sufficient, and then they'll quiet down and let other people participate as well. Brandon, go ahead and click for me. Click, yeah. One more time. So I have a rubric that I use here. I use 70% participation and then 30% is use of evidence. And based off of their level of evidence and development, that can go up. I try to monitor and give students like about 3 or 4 minutes of airtime. But depending on how many kids you have in your class, you can adjust accordingly. Go ahead and click for me 2 more times. So, assessment. I've done this 3 different ways, and I have a very obvious favorite that I'm going to point out when I'm done. I've graded as a group. It's not, it can facilitate teamwork, but it can also lead kids to bully and pressure each other. So it's not my favorite. I've seen other people do it using class webs, and depending on the culture of your classroom, that could work or maybe not. I've done it individually where I've just followed along and assessed them on the rubric by themselves. But when I do that, kids will they'll talk and they won't necessarily listen to conversations with others. The quick fix is to have students track conversations with you. Brandon, I'm gonna have you click one more time. One of my favorite is the self-assessment. And if you have the ability to conference with your kids, or your colleagues have the ability to conference with their kids, I very much recommend it, grading it together and have them reflect on their contributions and skills as a community learner. Kids actually have a tendency to grade themselves harder, and I also have to have conversations with them regarding like, hey, I actually think you did way better on this than you did. Why would you rate yourself so low? It facilitates relationships and building that even when you're on the camera. So one more click, Brandon, and I think we should be done. These are my references. I've gotten a lot of these from my colleagues. This is gosh darn good read that I would highly recommend. But yeah, that I hope you can use some of these tricks in your class, or you can get some of your colleagues to use some of these tricks for seminars in their classes as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. It's again, I kind of pointed out in the chat, I have not done a great job in recent years of promoting this type of conversation and reflection, and I want my kids to have a conceptual mastery of science, but how quickly we kind of slip into more procedural skills, right? This is super, super helpful. If anyone wants to share, please feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, or put a question for Amanda in the chat box.
Well, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate all of these STEM and science teachers letting the English teacher into the chat.
I see a request for slides. Amanda and I will work to make a modified deck that we can send out and share for sure. And you guys will see my email address at the end, so you can request it if you like.
Hi, I'd like to say something.
Please.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, and it's kind of like relieving to know that your students are also struggling with not sharing their camera and their video and getting the seminars like the students who want to share. I think that's a really key point that I really enjoyed that part of the presentation. So thank you for sharing that.
Cool. Well, wonderful. Yeah, Amanda, thank you so much. We'll jump into Guadalupe's slides. Would you like me to share for you too? That seemed to work best. So I got it also for a good intro for our next speaker, who I met at the good old days when we were allowed to do these in person. A simpler time. Oh my goodness. But one of the things that Guadalupe and I discussed is that she wants to go the admin route, and I'm holding out hope. I'm holding out hope that this is going to be like the first good one ever. But I believe if anyone can like be the person that sets the school on the path, it's going to be her. So I'm really excited. She also rose to quick fame in the education department with the lesson she's going to tell us about today, which was effectively a conversation for days. It was everyone was so excited about this. So really excited to share this with you as well. So please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm incredibly grateful and excited to be here with you all to share my students' experience in the Mission to Mars Challenge. I saw in the chat earlier some of you have done the Mars-bound activity, so I will be mostly focusing on that activity. So if you have any feedback or any additional best practices, feel free to shoot that in the chat. I wanted to start off just kind of the why behind that's one of my favorite activities and lessons to do with students. And it's because it really exemplifies science as a human endeavor. So if you want to scroll to the next slide. So this is one of the tenets of the nature of science that we hope students walk away with in their K-12 experience. But beyond that, it's also something that we want students to experience for themselves. So they get to learn that scientists and engineers come from diverse backgrounds. All of their experiences come together to create and innovate. But through this Mars-bound activity, they get to be those scientific thinkers and those engineers and become a part of this huge endeavor, which is, going to Mars. So if you can scroll to the next one. So here is an overview of the activity. Students design their mission goals, and they have a catalog of mission hardware. They have a rocket to choose from, and just like the engineers, they have to make decisions based off of constraints, right? So they have to prioritize criteria, and there's a huge emphasis on teamwork, which I think when I was growing up, there was like scientists and engineers are isolated. They're not great communicators. Definitely, we have lots to improve on based off of Amanda's lesson. But there's this huge emphasis on, we wouldn't be able to accomplish such great feats without the collaboration of people from not just diverse science backgrounds, but also diverse places from around the world. So if we can go to the next one. And it nicely aligns to the engineering standards of NGSS. So Paula mentioned this at the beginning. You can search on the website, and if you're looking for a specific standard. But I really want to highlight how the intention of the standards were to make these engineering practices accessible to all students. So no matter if you teach in a rural area or an urban area, if your students are English learners or students with disabilities, they can all participate in these practices, and we should be giving them the opportunity to explore in this way. So actually, before I jump off, last night specifically, I got a message from one of my students who is an English learner, and in her native language of Spanish, she shared how doing this project just really has made her so much more curious and has opened up her sense of wonder and discovery. So I just kind of wanted to share that little anecdote so that we can see that, really making our students feel like they're a part of this shared moment in time, right, where we're waiting for perseverance to land, where even though we're physically distanced, we're all connected by this goal. So I use the 5E lesson cycle, and where I fit this in is in the explore area. It can certainly go in another section, as you all know, but I think it's a great opportunity for students to tinker and then later think about their thinking. So we started off with Engage with watching some videos about perseverance and its mission goals, and then students get to jump into thinking about their own. What would they want to look for on Mars? Can go on to the next one. So I actually found an email. I went to when I first learned about this was in 2017, so a few years ago. At the time, I was teaching biology, and I'm always fascinated by astrobio. So that's sort of where I fit this in at the time. So here's a picture of the before times, which makes me so sad that I can't do this in person. But you see that there is a sort of like a game board, right? And the kids have these cards, which I actually have some at home. So they have a deck of cards with different tools and instruments to think about. They have a budget of cost, mass, and power. And together with their team, they have to decide, well, based off of our goals, what makes more sense? What can we feasibly take based off of our criteria, our limitations? I did not steal them. So thankfully, we had a nice printer, a poster printer at our school site. And so I was able to get these printed, and I only had one class set, right? So those are somewhere at school. Thankfully, actually, you bring up a great point. These are found on the JPL website, so you can print out the PDF files, or you can send. If your school doesn't have a printer, you can send them to your Office Depot, Staples, wherever your copy place is. You can scroll to the next one. So having done this activity before and seeing students engage in discussion, so I think coming from that last presentation, like this, if you don't have those systems set up, like where discourse is, or if that's something that you want to focus on, this is a great opportunity that lends itself to students having those conversations to think about like what scientific consensus means, right? Because they have to agree with their team. And so having done this before, I really wanted my students to be able to do this now, even though we're in distance learning. So I got a little creative and thought, well, if these PDF files are online, I can take screenshots of the cards and put them onto this Google Slides. And it was a test of my own. It was an experiment to see if it would work. I actually tested it out on my niece, who is in 9th grade, and we kind of went through it together and, you know, hoped that it would work with with a whole class of students. So if you look at the top, it's my period 1 class. So I actually put a deck of the cards on one slide for the entire class, and then each group of students all worked on the same slide deck. They each had their own like game board slide. And so that really made it for more of a collaborative experience also, because even though they were working in small groups, they could reference each other's in different groups. And so if you see on the right here, those are my little black boxes that some of you mentioned you're used to with not having cameras turned on. So the great thing about this activity also is that even if students are not turning on their cameras, you know, for whatever reason, we don't know their home circumstances, they're still able to engage in dialogue. So if you scroll to the next slide, in addition to having their cards on their slides, they also had a spreadsheet that they shared with their group, and they're keeping track of all of their budgeting as well. So I really, when thinking about this, I was thinking about how accessibility again. How can I make sure that all my students, even though they have different devices, or, you know, if they're not at home, they're somewhere else, how can they access these two things? So Google Slides and Google Sheets, you know, they can really pull up anywhere, and it really worked. And I actually realized I didn't introduce my school. So I teach at a small charter school in South Central Los Angeles. Almost all my students are on free and reduced lunch. They're all Black and Latino students. So, you know, in thinking about how can I really make sure that everybody has access, this was kind of like the easiest tool to go for me. And if you go to the next slide, if you go to the, oh, I forgot here. So here's actually a sample audio of students who do not have their camera on, but are still engaging in discussion. Hopefully it works. I can't hear it, so it might not be working. Yeah. Well, what you would have heard is,
We should have invested that one like the most. I think, but if we go for that one, we are looking at about 60 million. Do we have enough for both, or for the battery, the one we're trying to get, and for tools to do the searching? Yeah. We can see. We'll leave the power or the battery system last, and let's go look at some tools and see how much we have left after the tools. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking, Brown Blake? You can do that. Okay.
So there's her checking in with her teammates, make sure they're all in agreement. But yes, Brendan mentioned academic language in the chat, and I think, again, this is something that a lot of the words, you know, a lot of the tools they've never heard before. And, you know, in me popping into breakout rooms, sometimes I would like help correct, you know, how to pronounce things, but they are just learning so much from doing the activity itself, from you know, new vocabulary or new, just, you know, thinking about systems design. Yes, academic discourse for the win. And so yes, the engagement, even with the video off, I think is why I'm really pushing for everybody to do this, whether you're in person or online. It really is a great opportunity for students to practice that. So go to the next slide. So here are just sort of some of my tips for facilitation, or what worked for me. Obviously, everybody has their own strategies that they use, and you know what works best for your students. But for me, it was mostly helpful if I had student groups of about 3 or 4 in each breakout room. And because I had a class set of slides, depending on your students, right, you might have to have that conversation about don't go and edit other people's slides. Thankfully, my students were really respectful of each other, and I guess, you know, that comes with culture building and such. But for the most part, I think management problems have probably been reduced over distance learning. And so because when I initially put students into groups, I had labeled my different sections on the slides, like group 1, group 2. And so when they went into breakout rooms, they just kind of went to the slides of whatever their breakout room number is on Zoom. So it'll say like breakout room 1, so they were group 1. And so that just helped also with this. And then again, the students are analyzing their cards, their requirements, making sure that everything that they select is aligned to their mission objective while staying under budget. Amanda touched on this earlier about group accountability. So I would say, again, depending on what you already do, your own classroom routines, rules can be important in here. I use a group evaluation rubric so that students can evaluate each other's participation. But there's definitely room for like self-reflection, like Amanda presented, lots of ways you can do this. And because they are working on slides and a spreadsheet, it's really easy for you to monitor if you're able to populate the class deck. And, you know, if you see there's a board that's looking kind of blank, you know, you can strategically support students and know which breakout room to jump in. Or maybe you're looking at the spreadsheet and you're going, somebody's calculations aren't looking too good. You know, that way you can help facilitate that part a little bit better. And again, as we mentioned before, even with cameras off, discussion is still efficient and productive. And even some of my students, their mics were not working, they were still typing in the chat. So the other 2 students were able to ask the questions and they were responding. So again, lots of accommodations to make sure that everybody is included. So if you go to the JPL website now, the education website, you will find the new and improved version of what I created for my students, where you see the cards are on the slide directly and students can click through them, move them forward, and place them onto the board. It's kind of hard to see here, but some of the systems will say that they are required. So that's something that you might want to mention to your students and stamp before they break out into the activities to make sure that they include the required parts first before making their additional choices. You go to the next one. So part of the activity is that students get to select what type of mission they would like to send to Mars. And so again, through this activity, they're learning that there are a few different types of missions. So there are flyby missions, and then there are, if we go to the next, orbiters. And the ones that get us really excited, the rover missions like Perseverance. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of student examples. I allowed them to choose names for their missions, which also, created a little bit of more engagement and investment in this. So this one is the Exodus rover. And so they have their goals laid out. So they're looking for signs of life and want to collect atmospheric and soil samples. We go to the next one. They have their board here with their selections. Next one. There are also these optional spin-off cards. So I like to use them. I think it makes it a little bit more fun. And they're randomized. So I just kind of put them randomly per group. So this particular group got extra funding for future research, which didn't really affect their mission. And they wrote that in their reflection. We go to the next one. So once they were done putting together their mission and selecting all their hardware, This is where they start reflecting on the engineering design process before it's actually really formally introduced. So here they're thinking through what changes did they have to make, or what sort of revisions did they have to make because they couldn't satisfy a specific constraint. Usually the one that comes up the most is money, right? Just like in real missions. But sometimes they will say, well, I didn't have enough mass limit, or I didn't have enough of a power limit to choose the system that I wanted. So here they write a little reflection as a group about what their goals were, why did they select them, what were some of the challenges they experienced, did that spin-off card affect their mission, and they start to think about engineering design, again, in a more informal way. So after we're done with the activity, here's where we get to like the explain portion in the 5E model. So I review what the engineering design process is. We go through each of the steps, and we really emphasize on the right side of this, where we see that this is not a linear process. There are multiple rounds of testing and evaluation before optimizing their design. And this is where going through their hardware changes and accommodations really helps to stamp this for them, because they realize, you know, how many reiterations did they have to go through before they develop their final product. And so they think of, in terms of like a real Mars mission, you know, they're thinking about, as much as they would love to take all these tools, they can't always do that, right? So there's a big focus on that. I especially like to highlight that because I think, similar to when we talk about the scientific method, right? In the old days, we used to see it as a linear process, but we know that it's actually a cycle, just like this is. You can go to the next. So once we discuss that as a class, then this is where they do some thinking about their thinking, and they get introduced to metacognition, which this part is, I think, a little bit challenging for students because a lot of them have never been asked to think about how they made decisions and how they actually brainstormed. So they went through each of the steps together and thought through, how did we do this as a group? What parts align to each of the steps in the engineering design process? There's another example of another student. This one is a little bit different. So if we go to the next slide, they chose an orbiter mission to, I think, characterize climate. And so similar to the other group, they have the same components, but their spin-off card was different. So if we can, maybe we can skip to that, their spin-off card. Their spin-off card actually resulted in their rocket failing during testing. So if you look at the bottom, that effect means that they had to remove 2 tools to help them pay for their rocket. So in this, they're getting a new, an added constraint, and they have to decide which ones are we going to remove while still keep maintaining things that are essential to our mission. And as Amanda mentioned, like, you know, you have your small group collaboration, and then you have your whole group collaboration. So these spin-off cards I like because I think when sharing with the whole class, we get to see even more modifications. So we see they went through the same process of identifying their constraints and accommodations they made. And they actually have a lot more in their testing and revision section because of that spin-off card where they had to choose 2 tools to remove. Go to the next one. So there's a reflection, and they mention how it was difficult because they had to eliminate 2 of their vital instruments. Can you go to the next slide? So here I just wanted to amplify some of my student voices. So after they did their group reflections, I also had them do individual reflections about what they learned about the engineering design process and just like any other feedback that they might have. And, you know, like Amanda said, I love my students too. They just always blow me away with their responses. And it just really highlights how when given the opportunity to do something new, they, you know, go above and beyond our expectations sometimes. And so their reflections were very thoughtful. Natalie and Jennifer here both talked about, you know, just learning that exposure to learning about all the choices that go into planning a mission and how important goal setting is, right? Because without without your goals, you're not really sure what you should take with you. And you know, Jennifer here says the most important aspect in planning a mission is working with your colleagues and discussing decisions to make a greater impact. And I think that is so key to this, because again, I think that's something that often gets missed, but is probably one of the important parts of planning a mission, all these people coming together. Diana here says, I learned that not everything we would like to use will fit within the standards of this mission. Therefore, we must always be ready for change. And I think engineers would also agree with that, being ready to make changes and adjustments. And then a couple of the other students made an analogy that they felt like it was, after this, it was as rewarding as completing a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. And that one kind of tickled me. I really enjoyed that. And we see our last student, Brianna, here making a connection to college. And she said, you know, I feel like the skills I practiced during this activity will help me find solutions to the problem I face. So I think just this idea of brainstorming, of problem solving, it just extends beyond the Mars mission into, you know, sort of this life skills area. You can go to the next slide. So where do you go from here? What might come next? So there are lots of other Mars lessons to explore if you're following the weekly challenges. You know, this week we're launching our mission. You have those rocket activities. You can also design the next Mars rover. The one that I went to next, I had never done before, so this was a learning experience for me. My background is in biology. I am not a coder. I've worked with some of these little program block games. So I know sometimes there's a little bit of fear in jumping into these activities, but just as, you know, we keep saying to our students, working together and keep at it, keep problem solving, my students were actually able to support each other a lot more than I could sometimes in sharing their best ideas with each other. So if we look at the picture to the top right, that is Jezero Crater, which is the landing site for the Perseverance rover, and in green you see the projected rover path. So to make the connection between this activity and the mission to Mars activity, we looked back at what their mission goals were, and we looked at the other potential landing sites for this mission. So I made that decision in the interest of time because our time and distance our distance learning schedule is a little bit limited. But there's actually a list of 8 potential landing sites. So they went through them and they selected, you know, which areas aligned to. So, for example, if they were looking for habitability, what other areas with water might they want to search? So if you look at the one at the bottom left of the screen, I think that those were like hot springs near a volcano on Mars. So they chose their landing site and added that to their little rover game where they had to design science targets. So the top one, their target areas are, they use a star symbol, the one below use these little flags. And so they have to maneuver their rover to get to these science targets while avoiding hazards. So through this activity, again, they're practicing the engineering design process, but they're also thinking about just, you know, everything that goes into driving a rover on Mars. Some of them didn't even think, you know, about hazards and how if the rover hits something, it might be damaged and, you know, not be able to take pictures or do something else that they want it to do. So here I have a couple other student quotes. Yesenia, who says that, one skill I'm developing is perseverance to continue to try my best, even when things get difficult. And that specifically was, you know, thinking about the coding and how at first, shoot, that was really challenging, but how it's also given her this new respect for engineers and coders. And at the bottom, Kevin, I think he put this so great. He said, "This project has taught me to value the time I spend productively struggling." And that just really warmed my heart, because I think that is the goal as a teacher, and thinking about exposure to these activities and what they can do. And, we would hope that some of our students are inspired to pursue STEM fields. He certainly is. But at the very minimum, that our students can, think critically and continue to persist through challenges and be scientifically literate citizens. So I would argue that as right now, all of us are practicing engineering design in some way in our lesson planning, going through how do we make this accessible? How do we problem solve through this, whether you're hybrid teaching or in person or online? And I really invite us to, as you're exploring some of these activities or thinking about how you might adapt them to distance learning, to take the words of my students and really lean into the productive struggle and persevere. So with that, I thank you all for your time, and if you have any questions or if you have any feedback or suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. And there's my favorite science teacher reminding us to take chances and make mistakes, because that's how we learn.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Guadalupe. Again, she knows I already showed my cards to her that, when she sent this lesson to me, our already very busy schedule was just my team being hey, when can we get that from her? And then an hour later, I was have you heard back? It's a school day. Please give her a couple hours. So we were really, really honored to be able to steal that lesson and put it on the JPL site. I love that lesson. I heard a lot of really good things about, you guys saying it, implementing it. So just to be able to get it back in distance learning, I think is really exciting. Any questions for our amazing second speaker here?
So I'm seeing a question in the class, in the chat, about how much does it require for setting up the slides available online. It won't be very long. I think what you might want to think about is your grouping strategies. If you want to allow students to work in groups that they choose, or if you want to pair them, with certain students. I rehearsed this. Like I said, I practiced with my niece. So it took me probably a couple hours to prepare, to actually set it up. Initially, it took longer because I was coming up with the idea and how do I do this. But if you wanted to do this, on Monday, I would say it would take you anywhere between an hour or two. And once you have a class period, then you can just, make copies of your slides, so you don't have to keep making it for every single period, and that makes it easier also. Thank you all. Yes, embracing growth mindset. I think, if ever there was a time to do so, it would be now. Thank you all for your support in the chat here.
So before I kind of turn the floor over to our amazing speakers and attendees, if you guys have stories that you want to share, let me show you guys just very quickly. If you guys want to be part of this process, there are a couple options for you. So I'll share my screen again. So for example, if you want to submit student work, we have like a little student showcase, which I'll throw in the chat here. So you can actually send in like what projects are you and your kids doing, and just send in student artifacts. These will, every once in a while we pick a couple of these for social media and so forth. So kind of is a cool way to celebrate all the great things you and your kids are doing. But then again, as we saw with Guadalupe, like, and I mentioned at the very top, we are a team of, collaborators, right? We just want to help and kind of provide resources, but we are not the end all be all. So if you have great ideas, if you have things that are working, especially, in this environment, please reach out and share with us. Whether you just want to kind of pass it along, or if you want to be a guest speaker at one of these events, as mentioned, we do these every month. So we just love sharing and kind of providing the platform to teachers to be part of this kind of public forum. So with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for attending today. We really, really appreciate it. And if you feel like you're empowered to go forth and do great things, I know my heart is full, like hearing kids talk and write about science for so long, like, oh, what a blessing. I'm going to like revisit my lesson planning for next week now to make sure I kind of implement some of these strategies. I hope you guys will go forth and do the same, but we'll stick around and just have Q&A and share strategies. And if you want to maybe, unmute yourselves or talk about success stories or challenges you have, then this is the time. If you're going to head out, again, thank you so much for your time. Keep an eye on the events webpage you heard Paula mention for the next time we'll be doing these. And of course, I hope you'll all tune in on the week of landing. We will have events all week long, divided up by grade level. So if you're in elementary school, we're going to do a Q&A just for you, middle school Q&A just for you, high school the same. So really, really excited. We got less than 2 weeks left, and we will see you guys there. Thanks so much.